I think what spoke really very clearly to all of us was having heard the general outline of the social situation, the statistical situation, the comparison with other countries, the legal situation, was then to hear from real-life people about how all of this impacts on their own lives.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I thought long and hard about it as all my life I've fought against labels being put on me. I'm also a very private person, so telling my story makes me feel vulnerable. I'm here to tell you my lived experience. When I was born in 1972, my mother wore a wedding ring even though she was not married. The shame surrounding having a baby out of wedlock in Ireland was huge. She did not want to bring shame onto her family. She didn't want the neighbours finding out. When you look at the definition of illegitimate and words related to it, I can understand why my mother wore a wedding ring. Before I was 2 years old, my parents got married and I became legitimate, or in other words, legal. As a young girl, I did not dream of growing up and becoming a lone parent. I dreamt of the fairy tale that a lot of young girls dream of, to grow up, have my own home, get married and have children. Fast forward to when I was 21 years old. I had a happy childhood, a great education, and I was working very successfully in the IT sector. I was living with my boyfriend and we were very much in love. When we discovered I was pregnant, we were surprised but delighted. Rather than saving for a wedding, we saved for and bought a house. My daughter was born in October 1994 and it was the happiest day of my life, and still my proudest achievement. We decided to give her father's surname, as we knew we would eventually get married. Shortly after she was born, the relationship broke down and we decided to part. I was left with a new baby and a mortgage on my own. I realised then that the fairy tale was over. I became a lone parent family. I tried to make the best of it. My mortgage and my childcare costs were equal. Even though I was in a very well-paid job, I was left with very little disposable income. The struggle was daily, as I'm sure it is for many families today. The unexpected came when I had to deal with statutory agencies, and assumptions and judgments were made of me. During my daughter's education, parent-teacher meetings, etc., I was called Mrs. and my ex's surname. When I corrected them and said Miss, I would get that look. I imagined they would be thinking she's one of those single, unmarried mothers. These stereotypical responses came from different members of society. I would hear statements such as, you made your bed so you can lie in it, or you shouldn't have gotten yourself pregnant. Well, I didn't do it on my own. However, I was parenting alone. Even though my daughter had a relationship with her father all through her life and still does, most of the difficult decisions were left to me. When I was travelling outside of the country, I needed a letter for permission from her father to bring my child with me because she had a different surname than me. My story mirrors a lot of stories. I have a voice today for a cohort of society who are voiceless most of the time. A description of the Irish Constitution from the Citizens' Information states that the Constitution establishes the branches or organs of government. It established the courts and it sets out how those institutions should be run. It also describes the fundamental rights of every Irish citizen. Article 41 of the Constitution of Ireland protects the rights of the family and contains several provisions imposing duties on the state. Point 1 recognises the family as the natural, primary and fundamental unit of society. As Professor Siobhan Mullally said in her presentation, point 3.1 obliges the state to guard with special care the institution of marriage on which the family is founded. The family is founded on marriage. As you can see from Article 41.3.1, the family is founded on the institution of marriage. Because I chose not to marry, does that make me and my child not a family? I have to disagree, and say that my family unit is very strong, and I'm disappointed, as stated in the definition of the Constitution, that my family is abnormal or wrong or illegal in some way because we don't fit into the definition of the traditional family as stated. Surely the question should be, what's the fundamental rights of every Irish citizen? My daughter and I have a wonderful relationship. She's 25 now and still living at home with me. Maybe that has a lot to do with the economy, but rather than a love for me, but I'll take it. Sinead.
My name is Paula Fagan, and I want to talk to you this morning about the issues facing lesbian, gay, bi and transgender families. Speaking firstly in a personal capacity, I've been with my partner Denise for 17 years. I'm already emotional. I don't know why I'm emotional about that, sorry. We have 2 sons. Our eldest son is turning 14 and our youngest son is 10 years old. Denise and I planned our family together, and we were lucky enough to have our 2 gorgeous boys who are at the centre of our world. We have the same joys and the same challenges as other families living in Ireland today. Like other families with children our age, one of our biggest challenges is limiting screen time. And a word to Denise, who's probably at home doing that at the moment. However, unlike other families, myself and Denise are not both recognised as legal parents of our children. Only one of us is legally recognised as a parent. As the law stands in Ireland, we have no way for both of us to establish a legal relationship with our children. This presents legal, practical and emotional challenges for us. For example, every time we have to renew one of the boys' passports, one of us must sign a legal affidavit to swear that we are a lone parent. This is despite being civilly partnered to each other, living together for 15 years, and raising our boys together since they were born. We have legal guardianship of the boys, which means for now both of us can give medical consent in an emergency. However, guardianship runs out when a child turns 18. And for those of you in the room that are parents, you know that as a parent, you're a parent to your child all of their lives. And I suppose with my child now turning 14, we're facing, in 4 years' time, if the law is not changed, my eldest son will become a stranger to me in the eyes of the law when he turns 18. Sorry now. Our situation is the same for thousands of LGBT-headed families living in Ireland. In my professional role, I work for LGBT Ireland, which is an advocacy organisation working to improve the rights and inclusion of LGBT people and their families. We've been working with the government to bring in legislation that recognises families like ours, and have, as the last speaker outlined, the legislation called the Children and Family Relationships Act, which will fully come into force in May 2020, will mean that some same-sex parents will be able to establish a legal parental relationship with their children. This is obviously very welcome. However, this law does not cover all LGBT families, and it will not cover our family, for example. And it highlights the fundamental difficulties for legislators in this area. It is virtually impossible, the way the Constitution is framed, for the legislators, for people in government, to bring about law that will recognise diverse family forms and the ever-evolving advances of human reproductive technologies. The Constitution needs to recognise, protect and uphold what matters in a family, which is not the gender of the parents or the number of parents. It is the love, commitment and care within the family that defines it as one. In the case of children being raised by same-sex parents, putting the children at the centre of law reform is what matters. Recognising those who care and protect their children every day is in their best interest. As it stands at the moment, the Constitution is a barrier to recognising our family and thousands of families like us. Marriage equality did not fix this. because once there's a donor involved in creating a family, it is a problem in terms of the Constitution and legislating for that situation. So we ask that you, as representatives of the citizens of Ireland, recognise and protect our family and others like us by broadening the definition of the family. Thank you.
Good morning. Delighted to be here. David Saunders is my name, and I'm here to talk about my personal experience as a father, but primarily as a separated father. I was a young dad, and I became a father for the first time at 18 years of age. I then went on to have another child a few years later, and we bought a house. We were lucky enough to be able to buy a house at the time and moved in together, and we were a very happy family. The relationship started to break down over a number of years, and I ended up moving out of the family home 15 years ago, where we were living together for many years. When I moved out, my children were 4 and 12. I had no idea, and I didn't know what to do about my relationship and how it was breaking down, and I didn't have the skill sets to talk or open up or share it with anybody. I was devastated when the relationship broke down, and I likened it to a grief. It was the death of a relationship, and I had no idea how to process it or how to talk about it. I was one of the lucky ones, however, in the fact that I didn't have issues with access to seeing my children. I never had to go through the court system, and I never had to apply for guardianship, so for that I'm forever grateful. When I left the family home, I was lost, terrified, confused, and I was guilt-ridden, and I carried that around with me for a number of years. I had no choice but to move back to my mother's house due to financial restraints, and I also needed to be around family at this time. I tried to contact local organisations at the time for support and advice because I was lost, confused and deeply saddened, and I was offered horrible advice. It was made me even worse. I then tried to find out about mediation, and again the door was closed in my face because it was only an option if both parties were willing to engage, and that was not the case for me. I had no advice on how to tell my children about the breakup and support them, as they're the most important piece through this process, and to this day I'm forever grateful. I have such an incredible relationship with them. No one can prepare you for how lonely the breakup is and how lost you feel in a house that was once full of toys and children playing and children laughing and crying, and now you're sitting on your own staring at the four walls with no one to talk to, feeling empty and lost. Will the kids be okay? How is it affecting them and their development? Losing some of your friends and your circle also because you were once part of a couple that went out and that's no longer part of the piece. To complete another mess, you become no one to advise you or help you about looking after your own mental health through this process. Men tend to listen to other men who've been separated, and they're not always the good stories, and it paints completely the wrong pictures. The complete and utter madness of trying to parent your children in your mother's house. You feel like a failure as it is, and it adds to the mental mess that is already getting to a very dangerous point. And as a man, not being able to hold your hand up in a safe space and just say, I need help, playing the game that everything is okay and fine on the outside, but on the inside you're crying yourself to sleep at night. I liken it to a beach ball underwater where you just keep pushing and pushing, but eventually it has to come back up. How can anyone parent in this situation? So, in many sectors, fathers are a forgotten part of the family, but they're equally as important as the mother. They've no support and advice and don't even know our rights around guardianship in a lot of cases if you're not married. All painted with the one brush, and the terminology deadbeat dads is thrown around when nothing could be further from the truth. No advice or help for fathers who need it the most. The majority of men having to move back to the family home and try to rear their children in this environment. You need advice and guidance for fathers on how to support your children and what is the best way to support them through the breakup. Fathers want to be good dads and support their children, but we just need help sometimes, and we need to know how. I'd like to see a fathers network run by fathers who've been through the process to advise and support other fathers in this system. And clarity around guardianship and automatic guardianship. A proper mediation system to support the family. And through mediation, reduce the number of families having to go to court. Through a fathers network, a link to additional services, i.e. mental health services, children development courses, and maybe additional services that other fathers can avail of and support each other. A programme to help fathers to learn how to co-parent, how to be the best father that you can be with the time that you have with your children, and how your children develop through the varying stages of their growth. Support fathers, and also how to support a mother where possible to explain the importance of this for the children and the family's development. and better parental leave and fathers' rights around in the workplace, and housing for separated fathers, and community supports. And we see through research and personal experience that fathers play a meaningful and complementary role to that of the mothers. Fathers influence children in meaningful, emotional and psychological ways that last a lifetime. Let's not forget to empower fathers too. Thank you.